You know what? I could start this video about the history behind Star Fox 64 and how it introduced the Rumble Pack to the Nintendo 64, but I'm not gonna, because the day that this goes up, it'll be my birthday. And I just want to talk about a game I unabashedly love. I survived the 27 Club, I earned this! So here we go, bringing back a little bit of the Neo reviews, slap that in the corner. Alright, here's why
Star Fox 64 is my favorite game of all time.
So, Star Fox 64 does what every good sequel should do. Take the best parts of the original and expand upon them while fixing flaws and learning from mistakes from the previous entry. Bad frame rate? Fixed. Occasionally confusing environments due to the lack of textures? Fixed. More functionality and maneuverability with the Arwing? Added. Teammates yapping at you with a full voice cast? Added. It's a laundry list of fixes and additions that make the original look like booty, and that's how you entice consumers. Star Fox 64 is a game built with quality over quantity. Sure, you can beat the whole game in an hour if you want, yet you'll see just a fraction of what it has to offer. Harder levels, a plethora of secrets, it's the epitome of rewarding a player for getting good and experimenting with their playstyle. I know the way I love to take, and that's being able to gun down Starwolf twice. Yet, your way might be completely different. You might want to go to Sector Y, gun down enough of Venom's armies so you can grab the Mission Accomplished headline and head to Aqua so you can swim around in the Blue Marine. The amount of variety is staggering, and adds a ton of replay value that encourages you to repeat stages and get better. And god, the music! By this point, CDs were taking over, and the Nintendo 64 was especially odd about how it handled sound. There weren't audio files like CDs per se, nor was there a dedicated sound chip like the Super Nintendo. Instead, sound was made from samples on the actual carts themselves, and then produced through the coprocessor or the CPU, depending on how the developers wanted to implement it. In layman's terms, sound was a bit of a mess for developers. But then you have Star Fox 64, which has these bombastic tunes that are scored to the section of each level. You start with Corneria, which creates the sense of unease, that something's wrong up ahead. It picks up as you enter Corneria City, which has been laid to waste by Andross's forces. Falco even comments, "This is horrible." And the music continues, swelling as you blast through giant mechs, wrecking whole towers, and outmaneuvering gunships on your six. It just keeps getting better from there. Part of why I love obliterating Starwolf is that excellent music that accompanies the arrogant outlaws everywhere they go. It's exciting because it cuts in so suddenly and completely changes the mood and your goal whenever they stick their nose in your business. And the voice acting, oh man, it's an opera in space. Space opera. Is it good? Debatable. But is it cheesy? Oh yes. But it's the real deal. The authentic, wonderfully corny lines that it plays straight throughout the entire game. It's the level of sincerity that the game has that also makes the few moments of levity actually land because it's played so straight.
Thanks, Flip. Blue Marine came through. Flip is not such a screw-up after all.
Thanks a lot, Peppy.
The gameplay, though. Look, I've hinted at it, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty of why this works so well. The analog stick of the Nintendo 64 was revolutionary for its time, and Star Fox 64 uses it perfectly. The blend of arcade control here mixed with a tiny dash of realism is phenomenal. Your Arwing allows you to barrel roll, loop, and in all-range mode, pull a 180 with specific inputs. It's the right level of equipping the player with extra mobility without being overbearing. You don't have to barrel roll or do loops, and in all-range mode, if you just keep flying in one direction, the game will 180 for you. But does it reward you for using all those correctly? Absolutely. Visually, yes, time has not been kind to this game, but every planet and every location is different from one another, even those that take place entirely in space. Corneria is similar to our own Earth, but you've got planets covered in snow, you've got your industrial levels that are coated in smog, and then you have Venom, Lilat's own dark hellhole that makes it abundantly clear why Andross was banished there in the first place. It's easy to tell what an enemy is, where their weak spots are, and what projectiles you need to avoid. But my favorite thing about the graphics comes in the subversion and one particular level, Katina. See, up until this point, if it moves, you shoot it, unless there's an indicator showing it's one of your wingmen. But Katina has you gunning down enemies while trying to avoid shooting your pal Bill's forces. The game chastises the player for being so gung-ho with the fire button, instead urging you to use charge shots, so you'll only take out enemy ships instead of allies. It's a wonderful little moment that subverts the rest of the game and drives home how different each mission is. And we've barely touched on the variety. See, I mentioned Aquas earlier. That's the only level in the whole game with the Blue Marine, and you have to be good to get there. There's only 2 levels with the Landmaster, and they aren't nearly as difficult to get. In fact, you kinda have to suck to get one of them, and the rest are in the Arwing. The Arwing has 2 modes, which I've alluded to already, Corridor and All Range mode. The Corridor mode acts like a normal rail shooter, in that you're on a fixed path and are moving continually, having to react to anything that comes your way. All Range mode still requires the player to constantly move, but is no longer on a fixed route. These alone offer a wide variety to the game, with some stages only utilizing one or the other, while other levels will use both. The amount of variety in Star Fox 64 is largely up to the player, and again, the better you are, the more options you'll have in changing how the game plays. I love this game. I've loved this game for 20 years, and I don't know that anything will ever top it. And that's okay. Sometimes it's good to have that level of comfort in something that you know and trust. What's not okay is how the Star Fox series has never really gotten its footing after 64. See, I'd argue that the Star Fox series has had at least 3 great games, but you could argue that 2 of those, Star Fox and Star Fox 2, haven't held up well. Star Fox 64 does almost everything both of those games do, just much, much better. In a rather rude sense, they're almost made redundant by their successor. I still think that they're both fun games and worth playing, but the sequel exposes their flaws tremendously. So what did all the successors do, or rather not do, following Star Fox 64? It's simple, really. None of them went for the total package. Each time the series took a element of the gameplay and did something decidedly different with it. Whether it's making the game too short like Star Fox Assault, having the on-rail section as just a mere mini-game in adventures, implementing faux strategy and command, or overcomplicating the controls in Star Fox Zero, none of them truly felt like a real sequel to Star Fox 64. The closest attempt, Zero, bungled the controls and lost sight of what made 64 so good, just like all those before it. There's also the way that each entry has presented itself that's never quite replicated 64's emotion. The way the map of the Lilat system invokes your curiosity when you're clearly missing huge chunks of the game in your very first playthrough, and how the cheesy story and acting melds with a beautiful score that elevates the gameplay instead of merely existing because it's expected. These are all integral elements to what makes the experience of Star Fox 64 so good. Whereas in the following titles, they're just sort of there because, well, it's a Star Fox game, I guess we have to have them. The worst part is, Star Fox can still work. After Bayonetta 2, you'd think Star Fox Zero would have been it, but the god-awful motion controls and level progression hinder what should have been a slam dunk. Star Fox is a series that has a winning formula, and yet, it seems like the devs haven't been allowed to fully go back to it. Maybe it's meddling by those above them, or a perceived lack of ideas from management, similar to how Miyamoto claims he has no clue how to follow up F-Zero, for instance. But the fact is, Star Fox is a series with, at minimum, as many misses as hits. If you really want to get brutal, it's a series that's peaked all too soon. And yet, in producing my favorite game ever, that might not be a bad thing.